Hello, and welcome to the Zulu's Painting Show, the show where I hope very desperately that OBS doesn't decide that playing videos is for chumps. Today, we're going to my playback I was playing. Today we're going to be returning to our Z-95 Headhunter. Today we're going to finish up the paint scheme, and we're going to look into doing some weathering on the paint. So that should be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and pop down to our other camera. So here's what we managed to do last session. We've got a good bit started. We've got our base color with some highlights. Now we're gonna add a little bit more highlight. Sorry, base coat with a wash. We're gonna add the highlights to it. We're gonna do some weathering, and there's some little teeth that need to go along the front here. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. We've got our wet palette. We've got our paints here. The heat wave did a real number on some of my paints, so I had to go through and cull the herd, so to speak. Luckily, this one seems to have survived the heat. So, yeah, let's go ahead and just dive right into it. We're going to be using our Talaran sand. That's what it says underneath the paint that I've made a mess of. Give it a good, proper shake. Then we're going to snag some on our brush here. Roll it onto the wet palette. Oh, bump the camera because I'm out of control. And then we can just dive right in. Gotta make sure the cable's long enough that I can actually get my arm in. All the technical fun. Alright. We're going to go ahead and be starting off with our nice regiment brush. And we'll go ahead and just dive right in. Wet the brush a little bit. Snag a little paint. And we can start painting. Alright, where do we want to start? Let's go ahead and do some of these. We got all of these panelings, especially at the top of the engines. Again, we've got those nice little high points, so just turn the brush onto its side. Just sort of run it along there. And of course, we've got leading edges and tops of things. So anywhere that the light would be sort of coming at the top. Now, of course, with this being a ship out in space, that'll play around with lights. But in the same way that really these ships are, just they're fighter planes in space. So we'll sort of say that our ship follows a lot of the same principles of lighting. So I'm having a really hard time getting to the angle I want to for this. All right. Ooh, and we've already started to make a real difference in the colors here. You know, hindsight, having to should switch the water and the wet palette. Realize that my setup has been sort of wrong this whole time. So you're gonna get to watch some midstream change up. Oh no. I gotta just see what's underneath this dry palette. Just to say, nothing nice. Oh, you can't. Excellent. So suffice it to say, behind the scenes, it is a flurry of activities. I don't know why I didn't do this before. Ah. So much easier to use. Alright, we're back into it. Whew. Been an interesting start to the day. We had some streaming issues last night. OBS decided it wanted to sort of lose its mind, so that was interesting. And we don't need to do a lot for this. Kind of in the same way that with the red, we did just a little bit on a couple of the just there on the tops. We don't really need to go too nuts. Crazy? Crazy. In fact, I almost want to dry brush the tops of these wings. Hmm. You know what? We're gonna try doing a dry brush. Not because I'm looking at, so these wings have a lot of very fine and intricate details to it, and I wanna get that sort of lighter color on there. But since we're already gonna be doing some weathering anyway, I think a dry brush would actually be our best bet in this particular case. And we've got an extra paper towel that I can put in frame so you can sort of see what I'm doing as a dry brush. And by towel, I of course mean napkin from a fast food joint. Perfect. So, of course, for dry brushing, we need to go to our dry brush. Dry brushes are could be an old brush that was working nicely that you decide you didn't like anymore, and you just cut it off, so you just want it to be flat up at the top. So we're going to grab a little bit of our paint, get it on the top, and then we're going to start wiping it off the brush. And you can kind of see, once you get to the point where you're not really leaving any stuff behind, that's when you know you've got a good amount of, well, yeah, the right amount of paint on your brush. So then we're just going to go over the top, and this is just going to pick up the very tops of the different parts. And as you can see, those three little dots have already gotten a good chunk of paint on them. So any of those upraised spots are really going to be what gets the most. There we go. Now, had I known I was dry brushing, I would have done that before the red. Mostly because the likelihood of getting your dry brushing on other surfaces is very high. So you want to sort of be careful. Now, because dry brushing picks up this sort of the high points, any of those lines there, you're going to want to go for those. Sorry, any of those upraised spots, like this ridge here, that's definitely a part you're going to want to get. Also trying not to get the canopy, which is sort of hard. Now, if you notice, I haven't put more paint on my brush yet, and yet I'm still getting paint to come off. So this is a real testament to when dry brushing, you don't really need to like load the brush up. In fact, having a kind of just a little bit of paint on your dry brush really helpful. Now we got to reapply. A lot of times I like to just grab whatever of the main paint that I took off on my paper towel. And once you've applied like that, you want to try and go for the spots. Oh, we're going to need to redo that black. That's okay. You're going to want to go for the very highest points, because those are the points that are going to have the most sort of on them. Oh, this is messy. I'm going to have to go back over some of the red. Actually, this... No, some of the red, so some of the red and some of the spots are is gonna get a little bit of this light color on it. I was looking at the houndstooth, and I was noticing the red sort of is chipped off and shows the this lighter color through it. So this actually isn't bad there. When we get to our weathering, that'll be sort of an informative spot. Also, is it still too bright? I'll try turning down the camera just a little bit more, see if I can't darken it up just a little. No, that was a little dark. If can we find like a nice middle ground? Is that an option? That's not bad. Yeah, you're not getting too much reflections and you can still see the details. I think. It's hard to tell. Alright. And again, don't forget you've got an underside to your ship. Now you don't want to overpaint the underside because the underside is going to be the darkest part of your model. But you also don't want to not do any dry brushing on it. You can be a little bit messier on the bottom. And this dry brushing technique is actually going to help inform us when we get to our weathering. Because the spots that are sort of getting picked up by this oh yeah, we'll definitely have to go back over that canopy. The spots that are picking up the most of this lighter colored paint is essentially where the highest sort of wear is going to be. So that'll be where we come back to. No, see, now I don't. Now it kind of looks like it's gotten kind of dull. Color is. That's a little bit more vibrant. Yeah. After enough of these episodes, we will eventually find the right sort of settings for the camera. All right. Yeah, now we've lightened up that color. I might, yeah, we're gonna have to do something about that canopy. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Right. Now time for our next color. So we're gonna dry this off. Now, in the picture of the houndstooth, it has sort of a teeth design, a tooth design, running up the front of it. So we want to try and replicate that on this ship. So, how do we want to do this? If I remember correctly in the picture, there is a sort of gray outline, and then the teeth are white. Doing a gray outline, it would be very, very difficult. However, I'm going to teach you a technique that gets you what looks like a gray outline without having to actually, draw all the way around it. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have the outline sort of shape, the same shape we're doing for the tooth, we're going to do that in a slightly larger form in the darker color, and then lighter color over top of that, which should make something that looks about like a tooth. So we're going to go ahead and shake up our gray. For this one, we're going to be using the Celestial Gray. Grab some of that. Well, let's see how this one goes. This was one of the ones that was caught in the heat wave, so it might have some troubles. But it's looking like it'll be okay so far. As always, get a little bit of a little bit of your paint onto your wet palette. We're going to go ahead and continue with, for this particular one, we're going to go ahead and continue with our regiment brush. Mostly because the width of the brush, I think, is going to be very helpful. Oh. So that wet palette doesn't run away on me. And we're actually, I think what I'm going to do is just sort of set the brush sort of on the side here. There we go. And this one we want to be a little bigger because we're going to need to do a smaller one underneath it. And it might behoove us to snag the character brush for the other side. Make it smaller. We'll see. Yeah, we'll get a little bit on the sides, but that's okay. We can fix that in post. All right, so we've got our teeth started. Actually looks pretty nice. Hopefully it'll look better once we got the other colors in. Widen this one a little bit. You know, now that I'm looking at it, there's part of me that wishes I'd used a slightly darker color for this one. Because I don't think the white is going to be as dark as I want it to be. Well, phooey. Also, my right teeth don't seem to be as big as my left teeth. That's the fun of freehanding. You get to learn what you're doing as you're going. Yeah, this might need to be darker. Huh. Well, that's okay. We can fix this. So we've got our light color here. I don't know if I want to do the light. You know what? Let's go ahead and get a good contrast. We're gonna fix this. We'll clean it up. I actually had to go to the previous episode to remember what color I used for this, and I didn't really well show it last time, so I will show it this time, if nothing else, so that I can remember what color our base color was. We're using Scrag Brown as our base layer for this guy. So Scrag Brown will fix it. So now, almost looks like it was more orange. Pretty sure it's Scrag Brown now. Or that XV88. This is why you always write down your colors. Was it XV88? Oh, shoot. Nah, it was just Scrag Brown. Well, we don't make mistakes here, we make happy accidents. So let's see if I can accident my way through this paint job. So one of the things that is always a good idea is to have a thing called the painting journal. The painting journal is where you can write down what colors you use for a project, so you don't have to do what I do, which is sort of hope. Oh man. So nice thin paint. Do a couple layers, but it's okay. And we're just going to go ahead and bring that line all the way up to the nose. Give it a moment to think about what it's done. Think about what we've done. What I've done. You're just here watching. So while that dries, I think I'm gonna do. I'm liking this red motif, so I think so. They've got these little missiles that are peeking out the front. I think I just want to slap a little bit of red on those guys, just to again add some of that visual interest. And if I remember correctly, this is why I need to write things down. I remember correctly, we're using this here, chaotic red. Yep, that's chaotic red. Oh, for that base red. Just mix the old paint. A very similar color palette here. I'm seeing all of these colors together. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's pretty similar colors to each other. All right. And despite the fact that we're working on a very small area here, I think I'm still okay to use my regiment brush just because we are just doing our base color here. Just dab just a little bit of paint on there. We don't want to fill in those details because what we're going to be relying on to really make these pop is that lighter red that will be going over top of it. Also, I got way too much of this red out. We're just doing a little tiny thing. I got a massive dollop. I suppose that's a sort of a PSA. You can always put a little bit more paint on your palette, but real hard to put it back into the pot after it's out. You know, I'm enjoying these clear bases because I can paint the underside of things and you guys can still see it. Provided I put it at the right angle. Correct angle? Correct angle. It's kind of like when you're driving and someone says you need to go left ahead. Okay, right. No, left. Yeah, so I said right. It's one of my favorite skits is the who's on first. Anytime anyone says the word naturally, I say naturally. Throw the ball to naturally. I say no. Throw the ball to who? Naturally. Sorry. Delightful antics as I wonder about doing some painting. I don't know about you guys, but this is the sort of thing I think about when I'm painting. Who's on first and all that good stuff. Alright, so you can still sort of see our teeth through there. I'm going to put one more thin layer over the top of it just to really lock it in, because I just want to essentially do the same thing I've already done again. So I need to cover up what I've done so I don't use that as a pattern. I'll try and keep it nice and smooth. Now, for that little bit of white that got away there, I'm going to go ahead and leave that because we're going to go ahead and cover that up with some battle damage. Which we will get to as soon as I get these teeth figured out. Part of what we're doing is we're waiting for our dry brush to dry because it's going to be getting used for this next technique. All right. Yeah, so it's just about dry. All right, for this next part, what I'm going to do is actually, I'm just going to go ahead and go straight to our matte black. A little quick shake. Get that. I'm going to put it up here too, because I'm going to be playing around with my color. Because I don't want it to do it completely back. I want it to be kind of gray. So what we'll do is, I'm actually going to take, since we already have the gray on the palette, I'm going to take just a little bit out of here and mix it in just to lighten up the black just a little bit. Nice dark gray. That's a good color. Oh. Yep. Ah, perfect. Now, we've learned from the first time we did this, so we don't need to come all the way to the center. Just going to basically set it down, pull back. You gotta remember to really make sure that tip is there. Okay, yeah, and we're gonna have to clean up that side bit. We're gonna do that once we get the teeth done. So let's get the teeth on and then we'll clean it up. Right. So we got our first bit of teeth. And we come back in and do these ones. There we go. Much better. They don't look like teeth just yet. Oh, got that reflection. In fact, it almost looks kind of like a checker pattern. Make sure I'm going all the way to the edge with this one. There we go. Yeah, and I think I am going to come in with the detail brush for the inner part. Mostly because I'm going to be hard-pressed to make it smaller than this brush, the way I'm doing it. So, that's the start. Looks better with the light color, but I think it'll look better once we get the light color back in it. Now, I wonder if my starter brush is the right size, because my detail brush is very, very small. No, we're gonna go ahead and stick with the detail brush. So we're going, sorry, character brush. Going to our character brush. Now we're gonna go back to that gray color, because I think just a stark white wouldn't look maybe as good as kind of a gray. There we go. Got the gray loading the brush, and then the very fun part, we're going to try to just hit the very middle of these teeth. Oh, man. Oh, boy. What a mess. You know, I almost like the original teeth we did better. It doesn't have the same... So I was looking at the houndstooth, and it has these sort of... oh, there we go. Has this sort of outline around the teeth, which is what I'm trying to do with this effect, but it is really fighting me. See if we get a good angle so you guys can see what I'm doing. Well, there we go. See, now it looks like there's essentially an outline around it, except for that there's that one tooth that's a little muddy. See if we can clean that guy up. What we might do for this one is just have that be some battle damage. That is the nice thing about doing battle damage, is if you don't necessarily like how things turn out, you can just cover it with battle damage. I mean, don't use that as a crutch, certainly, but... Okay. See, now it's starting to do what I want it to. See how it's got that sort of, it looks like it has an outline. It's a bit messy, but I think once we clean up the sides again, it'll look a lot better. Yeah, I like how that turned out. Yeah, let's go ahead and clean up the outsides, and I think that'll be what we're looking for. See, the key with painting is perseverance, and not being afraid to cover up something and give it another try. And yet again, I'm going to need to do a couple layers. I really want to cover that up. But it's okay. We can do a couple layers. And while that dries, we can finish up the missiles. The key in this particular case is to use the contours of the models to be your straight line. Ah, there we go. Much nicer. But yeah, trying to do something like actually trace a line around a tooth would be incredibly difficult. Whereas if you just do your darker color underneath and slightly bigger, and then your lighter color over top of that, then you get a pretty good line around it. It's not the best, but we're also talking about very highly detailed sections, so it can get a little messier. And actually, we've got that little spot there. I'm going to try and separate the teeth just a little bit. I got a spot where the black touches each other, and I don't really want that. I want it to be a little bit more sort of distinct. Whew. There we go. That was a rough one to get in there, but I think in the end it helps. That was nice. Definitely want to reintroduce a little bit of the lighter color to this nose section, as is always the case. It would have been nice if I had done it in a slightly different order. That's okay. The longer you paint, the more you learn what kind of order you should do things in. Um, all right. I think having the teeth separated is a little better than having the sort of even line between on the teeth. Does it look like a mouth? A little bit. And actually having the that kind of lighter gray is going to be very helpful because that we'll be using later. I have plans for this dry brush, so I'm going to grab another dry brush real fast to finish, to redo our other color. Because the problem, and I don't, you may have noticed this as you're working, is if you wash a dry brush and then try to dry brush with it again, it isn't particularly dry. There we go. Got all that sort of blended back in. Leave that the way it is, but we'll get back to that. All right, let's do some weather. So I've done some battle damage on things before, and the principle is pretty simple. You want to have areas where it looks like the paint has chipped, and then expose the stuff sort of underneath it. Generally, you'll have a primer that is a slightly different color than the paint above it, and then below that you'll have the bare material. So when you're doing weathering, doing sort of a two-color weathering can be very beneficial. So, excuse me, for this one, we're actually going to use that dark gray we made before, and then underneath that, we're actually just going to go ahead and do, we're going to do a slightly different color, because I don't want to do the exact same gray. Let's see. What gray do we want to use? What gray still works? Actually, you know what? Let's just do it the easy way. So we've got our black with a little bit of the gray in it. For our light color, we're just gonna do white with a little bit of black in it. And of course, with your black goes a long way, so you don't really need to put a lot in. Just a tiniest little dollop. Just a littlest bit. And you will darken it up a whole bunch. Maybe a little bit more than I've done. Well, maybe not. So you can, if you'd like, do a metallic color as your sort of under thing, because you're thinking, well, what, if I've got exposed metal, wouldn't that be metal that I want? Ooh, that was too much. And yes and no. The trouble you run into with doing the metal, uh, ah, yep, that was too much. Problem with doing metallics is because they're reflective, it makes it very shiny. It makes it almost kind of hard, like it looks sort of strange. Oh, maybe not. Maybe that'll be okay. Now, essentially, I've just made more of this gray, but slightly different, messier. Yeah, let's do a little bit more white back in there. There. Plus, the color that sits on top of it's going to change kind of what it looks like as well. It's a whole thing. You've seen those optical illusions where they'll take two of the same color, but they'll put them on slightly different backgrounds, and so it changes what they look like. Same principle. So we're going to start with some easy stuff. We're definitely going with our character brush for this one. Ooh, so we're going to start with our dark color. You don't really need to load your brush up too much because we're just going to be putting just a little bit on. For the simplest stuff, we're going to start with we'll start with things like the leading edge. So this is the area where you'd have sort of the most contact with flying debris and that sort of thing. So just gonna put a little bit there. This is gonna be sort of where things were smashing into the front of the wing as it was going along. And we're doing for this first one a nice thick layer. We wanna really make sure that we got a lot of area to work with when we get to our lighter color. All right. So we've got that nice sort of dark leading edge. And this dark color represents sort of the primer that would be underneath. So you can play around with it. You can also, if you wanted to just do it as a much sort of a slightly different, like sort of slightly lighter version of your base paint, that also definitely would work. So there we go. So we got our nice that good starting spot. Now we got to do the exposed metal underneath. So this is going to essentially be following the same sort of lines and directions, but this time it's going to be slightly smaller. And again, we're trying to just follow those same sort of lines that we made with our initial color. So trying to kind of follow it into those spots. And now it has a nice damaged look. We got a couple. Yeah, look at that. And this is definitely the sort of thing where you do kind of just gotta play with it until it does what you want it to. Also, because we've got a little kind of thick spot there, the light color there. So let's go back with our dark color and fix it up. And this one, more than a lot of them, is a lot of sort of give and take with your colors. Where if you get a little too much of one, you can come back with the other. It really exemplifies that idea of, you know, many thin coats. So honestly, that's not bad. I'm kind of liking how that's looking. A little damage there. Now, with this nose, the nose is going to be the spot that really takes the most damage. So we really gotta play around with that. And again, you got to remember to sort of follow the contours of of how the nose moves. So it's gonna kind of come up the sides here. And you've got this little guy here, so that'll catch some stuff as well. I don't want to have too much on here because I don't want to overly paint it. Alright, so we've got our first sort of layer. We've got the start there, but now we gotta really send it home. Get that light color in. And again, we don't want to go too nuts. This is supposed to sort of be the very sort of deepest inside spot. So make sure that our brush isn't too loaded so don't go too crazy. And then we're just going to sort of, again, we're just going to follow those contours. Start very much at the leading edge. That's going to be the spot that's going to get the most damage. And then it'll sort of go up from there. And if you get a little bit of, if it's not as completely even, that's fine, because things wouldn't necessarily be sort of hitting it completely evenly. I'm actually gonna just make sure that this brush doesn't have much paint on it at all. Almost like we're dry brushing, but with the sort of the side of our brush. There we go. So now we've got that nice sort of damaged paint look. I think we're gonna try and widen up there in the middle, give it more of a, because our lines are a little too flat, I'm seeing. You almost kind of want to V it in there. There you go. So we won't have sort of flat lines. This is, things are coming in, hitting the nose and sort of scraping things back. Now, so we've got a little bit of the paint on there, but what I want to do, I want to do is a little bit of what's called stippling. So this is damage on sort of your leading edge as things are sort of coming at it. But if it's, you know, were to just have bad paint, like this thing's been, you know, used and abused for quite some time, or maybe if it's been sort of hit from the side and that's beginning to corrode. So we're taking our dry brush and we're gonna sort of tap the brush into our paint. You can kind of see it on the oh, actually can't. So we've got just a little bit of paint on our brush. We've just tapped it in, and then we're just gonna take the brush with the paint on it and just sort of with it flat, sort of tap it into our surface. See, it has that kind of speckled look. And then we're going to follow the same sort of principle as our other worn paint. The idea being that the sort of the most paint that you'll see will be that sort of undercoat. And then underneath that, there'll be just a little bit of the exposed metal. The difficulty is you do want this brush to be relatively dry. So I have to really dry it out. I've discovered that a kind of an interesting way to be able to tell sort of how wet your dry brush is if you use sort of the side of your hand here, you can sort of feel the wetness of it. Alright, so we're going to stipple on just a little bit of our light color, but try to do less. Much in the same way that we did the other battle damage and follow sort of a similar principle. And you can see how we're starting to get that sort of worn, damaged look of the paint there. And actually, what I'm going to do for this one, because you'll have that a little bit of stippling makes sense kind of in the middle part, but or on the outsides where you can kind of see a combination of both paints. But for the very center of this sort of damaged area, what I'd like to do is really sell the idea that the paint has worn off there in the middle. So I'm actually going to come in with my regular brush. I'm going to make sure that it's not too loaded because I really don't want to. I don't really want to like completely cover it, but I just want to really focus that paint there in the center of this damage. There we go. And now you've got this spot that very much looks like it's, you know, it's sort of a constant wear spot. Maybe that, I don't know, in the loading dock that he uses, maybe that's a spot that gets hit pretty regularly. Maybe it's a, I don't know. Yeah, you can kind of come up with different ideas of sort of why they were hurt or damaged in the way they were damaged. Actually, not here. And the thing about battle damage is it's so very subjective. You can really sort of play around with it. The final thing I think I'm gonna do for this guy is we're gonna do just a glancing shot. Someone has shot at this guy and just barely managed to miss him. So we got this spot here right up at the top. We're gonna just really use that. So we're going to take and make a streak. Nice big scorch. And it's okay to have it be sort of rounded here on the top because that'll be sort of where it made its first impact and then sort of drug along the rest of it. And you can actually kind of continue the damage there. So you've got this hit that sort of raked itself along the top of this ship. And just a black streak like that doesn't really look good. So what you're going to want to do is add a little bit more sort of character to it. Go back to that light color we've been using. And very, very thin down the middle of it, we're going to add a little bit of that. Again, we've gotten through the paint, we've gotten through the primer, and we're now down to the bare material at the bottom. So I really want to make sure that the tip is pointed. Oh. There we go. And this is actually using a lot of the same principles that we used for those houndstooth. In fact, now that I'm looking at it, it kind of looks like those houndstooth. So we're going to have to differentiate that. And so the way we'll do that, right. So to come back in with our black and do some sort of imperfections, do some little bits here and there. I don't want it to be completely a little bit more sort of jaggedy. Oh, now we've got 3 colors in here. So we've gone right back to that scorched. So now That really looks like it's sort of burnt metal. That wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but you know what? In the end, I kind of like how that turned out. So you've got that big old chunk taken out of the top there. You've got some weathering on the leading edge here from where it's just been taking damage as it flies through stuff, and on the nose. And then you've got that sort of wear spot on the side. And I would probably add some other wear spots here and there, just to finish it off. But for now, these are going to be the spots that I really I focus on. The other thing that you could do, especially with this red, oh yeah, we were talking about the red. You know what? I'm gonna do it real fast. I know we're at about out of time, but I had a late start, so I wanna do a little. So we're gonna go. So we've got the red here, and it's been sort of streaking in. So a little bit of the brown has gotten on there, and I kind of want to continue that idea. So we're taking the same principles we did here for the leading edge, and we're going to kind of just do that for the red here, as if some of the brown color underneath was beginning to show. You know, I'm not as keen on that. We'll have to return to that. You know what? We'll come back to that. I do like the other weathering, though. I think the other weathering turned out really nice on this guy. This ship looks like it's seen some damage. Seen some wear and tear. Got the teeth on there. Yeah. And again, just for comparison, I want to remind myself where I started. Because we started with a very different miniature, or a very different paint job. So if you'll remember, these two Z-95 Headhunters were in the same package and had the same paint job. And they now are very, very different looking ships. And honestly, what we could have done is just added some wear and tear to this paint scheme. And I think that would have been a fun look for it as well. So, alrighty, thank you very much for watching. I'm glad that OBS didn't decide to catch on fire. We'll be back next week with some more painting. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. If you'd like to talk to me more directly, if you go to zulusgames.com, if you go to the contact us, there is a link to the Discord. I am on the Discord pretty regularly. Do @employee, and I'll be able to find you. But until then, have yourself a lot of fun doing some painting. Stay safe out there, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.